right now?
Yep, I'll do the same thing too. So we got you double recorded. All right, Heidi.
Better safe than sorry.
That's right.
Cool. Thanks everybody for joining. So excited to be here today. Introducing Daniel Mezick. But before we do that, I want to talk to you a little bit about ourselves and sort of promote ourselves because we just do this from the heart, really. And so Isaac Garcia, Jeff Kors, who's not here today, myself, Lori Townsend, who she's not joining, she should already be joining. Mark couldn't join today, and Kristen, shout out to Kristen as our newest co-host. We're just growing, and so many people are joining, and we're adding new events all the time, and so we just keep adding co-hosts to help us get better. So yeah, we've been finding topics that we think will resonate with the audience, and so far they have been, which is super exciting. And sometimes we have Agile cocktails, and we find awesome speakers for you guys. And then the events are actually recorded on our website. So go to Coaching Agile Journeys, past events, and you'll see the past events, and there's a place there for the Agile cocktails too. I'm wondering if anyone's here from Agile Orlando Meetup, because this is posted there too. So shout out to all the Agile Orlando folks who are here on the call today. And we've been doing this for 2 years now, and we fund this out of our own pocket. So if you love Coaching Agile Journeys, then consider giving us a tip. And the next event is going to be Bob the BA. I was so excited for Bob the BA to come and join us on September the 12th at noon Eastern Time, which seems to be a time that people like when we have our events. So I think this goes along well with the topics that we're talking about, right? Kind of like open space topics and how do we influence without authority. We have other events coming up that really align well with this for coaches, so happy to see everybody join. And I'm going to stop sharing again. Stop share, that way we can see all you kind people back. And is Daniel, are you back?
Yes, I'm right here, yeah.
Okay, awesome. So before you start, I just want to say, a couple years ago when I ran into you at Agile Main Day, never did I imagine that we'd be here today and you'd be sharing this awesome information that you have with us. And of course, I'd heard about open space agility, hadn't really delved into the book, but what you were saying just resonated with me so much. I'm super glad that we have this connection, and thank you for all the work you've done for the community. And yeah, super excited to hear what you have to say.
Thank you, Heidi. Yeah, it's such a pleasure to be here, and it was such a pleasure to meet you. It seems so long ago now, but it was only what, last May or?
Yeah. Was it last? Yeah, it was.
Yeah, May 2017. It's a little over a year. Yeah. So, okay, great. So, can I start now?
Yes, you may start.
Okay, so let's just pile in. First of all, thank you for everyone who's attending. I'm very grateful that you're here. I'm very, very grateful to the sponsors and the promoters of this event, the organizers, the people who are doing all the hard work of putting this whole event in this venue together. So thanks to each of you that are organizing, and thanks to each of you that are here. We only have an hour, right? So we really have a lot to do. And what I'd like to do is just kind of give you some background on myself real quick, not as a resume review, but more of like, what's the context of this conversation, right? So, in 2013, I got invited to the Global Scrum Gathering where I spilled the beans on something called open space agility. And that's a before-after open space kind of a structure that looks like this. So those two big circles are open spaces, and those arrows going, this way are that's time. So 45 to 90 days is between the two open spaces. And inside we do experiments, we do inspections, we do improvements, and everyone knows in this event that we're going to do this again. Okay, so I know a lot of you have been inside open space events, inside coach camps and conferences. The real power is in your organization and not in retrospectives, but in inspecting the actual process of changing. In other words, not the deliveries, but the process of delivery, the new process of delivery. Inspecting that will get you a very long way very, very quickly if you do it in a whole group kind of a way. Okay? So in 2012, I wrote a book called The Culture Game. I'm going to share my screen right here and really take a chance and see what happens. So I'm going to click on the screen here and see what it does. All right, so now I'm sharing my screen. And this is the book, The Culture Game. I wrote this book in 2012. This is a bottom-up kind of a book. If you're in a big company and you want to change the culture of your company towards more agility and you're a manager and you convene meetings and you have maybe some budget or hiring authority, this is your book. You do not require an agile transformation to get the benefits of the techniques in this book.
Dan, we're missing your screen.
Pardon?
I think we're missing your screen.
It's not being shared. Oh, there it goes.
There it is.
Okay,
Yeah,
sorry about that. Yeah, thank you for that. So this book I wrote in 2012, that's about sort of a bottom-up stealthy mode to get to agility without requiring any top-down authorization. And then the Open Space Agility Handbook is, chapter 21, an elaboration of the Culture Game book, which goes very, very deep on open space and how to use it in your organization. And of course, that does require authorization, right? So that's a little bit about me. In just a couple of days ago, a fellow named Martin Fowler, anyone ever heard of him? He actually stood up at the Agile Australia conference and issued a protective warning in a protest about the tolerance of imposition. And he used the term the Agile industrial complex to describe what's going on. So this whole thing about imposition versus invitation is really where we're at here. This is my bio page. You can go to danielmezick.com to reach this page. So that's my first name, last name.com. And you can get there by just, going right to this place right here. And if you go there, you can subscribe to my list. Is this okay, Heidi, by the way, for me to do this?
Yeah.
If you want to get the document that we're going to go through during this talk in this session, you can just go to my list, subscribe to my list, and you'll get it on Wednesday. All right? It's a 16-page document that goes step by step. We're going to walk through it. You'll get the gist of it. If you want the sort of convenience of having this document, I'm happy to share it with you if you jump on my list, okay? So you just go right there, danielmezick.com, and in the very first line, subscribe to my list, and I'll know if you sign up in the next 24 hours that it's you, okay? So that's kind of the story with the context of this ready for Agile thing. Now I want to find out, is Joe DeAngelis here?
I am, sir.
Joe. Okay, so everyone needs to know, Joe and I are tight colleagues and friends. You need to mute, I guess, Joe. And then I'll mute. And I started talking with Joe. I started thinking about done, like done for user stories. What about done for transformation? But obviously we're never done. So like what would done be for an iteration of enterprise change? I started thinking about this and I thought I had a pretty good idea. And I mentioned it to Joe. And at this point, I'm going to kind of hand it over to Joe. And Joe can tell the rest of the story about where Ready came from and what we did with that. Okay, Joe? So just unmute and go ahead.
Okay, you guys hear me now? Okay, great. Seems to be a lot of background noise. Okay, yeah, so thanks, Dan. So Dan and I are talking, Dan and I have worked together for several years now through Agile Boston, and we're talking about a number of things, and he starts telling me about this definition of done for an Agile transformation. And I'm working at a company, a different company that I'm working at now, and they were a large insurance company. And I was very frustrated that day because it was crystal clear to me that this company was not ready to even start an Agile transformation. So when Dan's talking to me about done, and I said to him at one point, Dan, never mind done, we should have a definition of ready for Agile transformations, because a lot of these companies just aren't ready. The definition of ready, unfortunately, is do we have budget to hire some coaches or hire an agency to come in and give us some training, some of which I would say suspect training, and, let's mandate everyone to go to Agile, and that's going to be the way it works. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I've been around a lot of companies now over the last 10 or 15 years, and it doesn't work. They just seem to wallow in the same state of training and more training and coaching and different coaching, but they never seemed to get anywhere. So that resonated with Dan, and Dan said, yes, exactly. We actually need a definition of ready, and that's how we started working on this.
And I felt really, really stupid at the time for not thinking of that. So Joe and I went on to give a presentation in the deep summer at Agile Boston. And we got like almost 85, 90 people coming to this event in the middle of July. So we knew that it was a pretty hot topic, okay? So that's what you're getting. We presented it once, we built out this document, and now I'm gonna run through the whole thing for you. And this is very interactive. Feel free to, I like the idea, if you have a question, of just holding your hand up to the screen, and then the folks who are running the engine room can, call on you and take a question. How's that sound? Okay. So what I'd like to do now is kind of set the stage for this whole thing. And then we'll kind of dive into the document, and I'll share my screen with you. Okay. So I want to point something out at the team level. The team level. We've all heard about Agile in name only. We've heard about it at the enterprise level, at the team level. Let's just talk about it at the team level. Here's what's true about Scrum. Scrum, Agile, and Kanban will all change the way decisions get made. So ponder that for just a minute. Imagine a world where you were doing something and you pushed it aside, and now you're doing Scrum. People that used to make certain decisions don't make them anymore. Now other people make those decisions. Okay? So here's the bottom line on the whole thing. If you haven't transformed the decision making, you haven't transformed anything at all. I want you to just think about that for a minute, everybody. Just think about it for a minute. No matter what it is, no matter how you do it, Scrum, Agile, Kanban, whatever, if the way decisions get made about the product development and delivery, if that doesn't change, then nothing has changed, no matter what words and terms and framework you're using. It's just Agile in name only, because Agile's all about changing the way decisions get made. The real transformation is the transformation of decision-making in the pursuit of value. Value. So we want to align decisions on the value stream. That's what Scrum does. That's what Kanban does. That's what the Agile principles do. Now you can imagine this is not going to be fun for everyone, because folks that are invested in the status quo are not happy. And that doesn't mean that they're evil or bad people. They play by the rules. Nobody saw this coming. All the rules change. And you know what? If I'm running QA, I am not happy. Not happy. If I'm an architect and I go read the Scrum guide and says everyone has the same title of developer, I'm allergic to that. Okay? And if I'm a project manager and I go online and I read about that everything is self-managed and self-organized and Agile, I am triggered and I need to see my therapist. Okay, so this is what we're up against. So, Joe and I talked a lot about how this all works and what has to happen. So I started thinking about this. And I'm going to show the screen now and kind of show a summary and kind of talk over it now. Okay, so I'm going to go to my screen share and I'm going to click on this document. And maybe I can make the fonts bigger. I hope you can all see this okay, this Word doc. What we're going to do here, before we start down the road to transformation, is we're going to get permission from the executives to socialize the definition of 3 words and also get agreement about 3 interrelated sets of rules. So we're going to go to the teams, the stakeholders, and the executives, and we are going to get a shared agreement on some word definitions: Kanban, Agile, and Scrum. So we can all talk from a shared language, from a shared sense of language and experience. Then, oh, and by the way, that's not easy. Did I mention that yet? The second thing is we are then going to go by again to all those three constituencies, the executives, the stakeholders, and the teams, and we are going to socialize the rules of Kanban, Agile, and Scrum, and we're going to encourage the expression of, objections. We're going to create space for objections to be heard, and then we're going to try to get as many people in as we possibly can. And here's our magic trick. Our magic trick is we are going to ask them to commit to these agreements for a limited period of time, like 45 to 90 days. Okay? Why? Because people can't get in if the commitment is for the rest of their lives. But they can get in if it's for 45 to 90 days. So even if you don't use OSA, Open Space Agility, I want you to just think about the idea that if you ask for less, more people can say yes. If you ask for less, more people can say yes, especially if they know for a fact that there's going to be an inspection at the end to see just how great this was, okay? So I'd like to take a question right here before we dive into the details. We're in good shape time-wise, and I just want to open it up to anyone who's got a concern, an issue, a comment, a protest, or a really scary idea. Is there anyone like that out there? If you do have a question, just hold your hand up to the screen, and the folks in the engine room will find you and then put your question up. Okay, is there anyone who's got a question that they might want to ask me?
I see Ryan's got a hand up there. So
Yep.
Ryan, fire away.
Yeah, you mentioned about, again, the decision-making process. A lot of times, that will happen in large enterprises outside of even our most senior level IT executives.
Right.
And the decisions that they're making are driven by factors that are almost completely divergent from what we're talking about in terms of principles and values and culture and decision and team decision-making.
Sure.
How would you suggest that we as practitioners and coaches approach that level of resistance?
My guidance is to start discussing lines of business, divisions, business units, and value streams, right? Because you want to get, what you really want to do here is, ideally, in an ideal world, there is no impediment to flow in the value stream. None. That's perfect, right? Like it's like 18. It's like the score of 18 in golf. Perfect would be no impediments to flow, maximum flow. Okay, so, hey, guess what? The prime impediment to flow in a value stream is the outdated decision-making process that worked 2 years ago and doesn't work anymore. Yeah, that's your number one obstacle to the flow. So according to the theory of constraints, we want to get rid of that one first. So I want you to go to the business people, talk about divisions, departments, business units, and then discuss value stream and tell them what it is, and don't spend a long time explaining it. Just explain it's the flow of value to customers and the flow of revenue back, and it's all the steps in between along the way. Value stream mapping, value stream analysis is mapping and analyzing those flows and those steps. But at the end of the day, our goal is no impedance to flow. Just perfect, right? So that's my guidance, Ryan. Can I go further with the answer to that question for you?
No, that clarifies it, and from a direction standpoint, I certainly don't want to impede others from curiosity they may have. So this is great.
Okay, looked like Alex had his hand up. You have to unmute, Alex.
Hear me now?
Yep, I can hear you. Yep.
I'm all in. By the way, thank you. It's an awesome subject, and I think if we start any kind of engagement correctly, most likely we're going to finish correctly. And yes, I agree with you. definition already for any engagement needs to be done, and you hit the right points. I have one question you keep saying, and I just want to get the clearance. How do we define, as Agile coaches, right? How do we help our organization to define what's the value is? I can hear it's a lot of blah, blah, blah in our communities. Okay, value stream, value that, value that. Value for me, as Agile coach and a Scrum Master, it's different than value for the leadership. It's different, the value, than for the whole organization, because we can define the business value. And to me, the biggest impediment in any kind of organization, how do they define the value? Not only how did they define the value, also how this value is being communicated. And every time I'm coming to the leadership, and again, from previous engagement, previous training, they keep saying to me, oh, it's a value stream. I'm like, hold on one second. How do you understand the value stream? Yeah. Because what's value for the marketing department, completely different value for the key department. And
well, yeah. So let me answer that. So,
thank you.
So value streams, there's primary and secondary streams of value, right? So the primary value stream is where the revenue comes from. It's where the cash comes from, right? And then the secondary value streams support that flow. For example, marketing is the setup for sales, right? Sales generates direct revenue. Marketing doesn't, right? But marketing supports the flow of value through the sales value stream, right? So this is how you have to think of it. And then there's if you're not generating revenue or supporting a group who does, you need to find another place to go to. You need to find another position, because at the end of the day, we need to focus on the flow of value, and customers define what value is, not us. So really, here's something else I'm going to offer you. Organizational transformation is not what you get with Agile or Lean. What you get is a transformation of the customer experience. So two things are true in a real transformation. The customer experience is transformed, and so are the decisions that influence that. Okay? Does that help you, Alex?
Can you hear me now? I'm sorry.
Yep.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Yes and no. Because what you're saying that, and again, I'm sorry, I'm going to disagree. Not because I'm Russian, that's why I'm always disagreeing. Okay. Because what you said, and it makes sense to me totally, right? But in any organization, especially enterprise, it's a complex adaptive system and no linearity here, right? And from that point, from the no linearity, okay, we cannot define the values only by the whatever its revenue is coming and whatever its revenue is being supported, because the market value, I mean, the value is coming from a commercial marketing value. Even value in Scrum, it's also value there, okay? Yes. And if we keep talking, I mean, with agreement and definition already, and I don't want to sidetrack today's conversation, we need to talk, I mean, we need to agree, and I believe it's the hardest one to get an agreement. What is the value for each engagement? And again, I wasn't looking honestly for the answer, because I don't know what's the answer.
Okay.
So far.
All right.
But just to point that we need to also, in the definition already, identify how we identify the value.
Well, I'm very pleased to go deeper on this after this session. Like, we could get some kind of thread going on email or social media or something and go deeper on this, okay?
Yes.
But in summary, decisions need to be aligned to support the flow of value through the identified value streams in service to transforming the customer experience. So customers, when they come home or they go to a social event, they're like, you know, I had the greatest experience with company X, right? That's actually our goal, because that marketing is free and the cost of that sale is zero, right? So when we talk about transformation, we're talking about the transformation of decisions. So let's get back to that now, if we can. When you bring in Scrum, you're gonna set aside what you were currently doing for making decisions, and you're gonna drop in Scrum, a prefabricated sort of system for decision making that has 3 roles. And we all know the kinds of trouble that we run into as soon as we do that, right? I mean, immediately it affects everybody, even if it's only one team, right? So how much greater is the problem at the enterprise level? If it's so difficult to change the way decisions are made for one team, how will we ever be able to transform decision making across the whole org? So that's really the problem we're trying to solve. So if I go back to my screen share here, what we're going to do to solve this problem is we're going to recognize some things. Okay, here's the first thing we're going to recognize. We're going to recognize that word definitions are agreements. When we agree on a word definition, we are agreeing to something substantial, and it is a genuine agreement. If word definitions aren't shared, there is no agreement. There's many loud voices in the Agile community. There's a high noise to signal ratio. And to cut through that noise, we need to use definitions that are actually shared in our organization. So the very first thing I want you to do is socialize the definitions of Agile, Scrum, and Kanban. And they're here into those three constituencies: executives, stakeholders, and teams. Why? So we can get a running start. So we can identify areas of resistance. So we can get a shared language and start to be singing sort of from the same sheet of music. So later on, when things get sticky, we can call people to accountability regarding their agreements. Here's another reason: to understand the objections that people have to agreeing to words. Okay, so I'm gonna tell you a story, but before that, I want to give you the three definitions. So here's the first one: Agile, for some limited period of time, like 45 or 90 days or some reasonable amount of time. Agile, as we use it here, whether it's business agility or software agility, it really doesn't matter. We are using the 4 values in the 12 principles of the manifesto as guidance for behavior. The manifesto is the definition of Agile. It's not someone else's. We're going to keep using this. Why? It's accessible, it's authoritative, and it actually works. So we're going to tell the folks, we will evolve our definition of agility, but for now, let's all agree it's these 4 values and 12 principles. Okay, next one, Scrum. Scrum definition is the Scrum Guide. So we're going to use the Scrum Guide for the definition of what Scrum is. So when people say, what's Scrum? We're going to go, well, it's this description of this framework in this thing called the Scrum Guide. Why? Again, it's authoritative, it's accessible, and it actually works, okay? That's a tough one, by the way, once they start reading the rules. The last one is Kanban. We often think that Kanban is a simple rows and columns, visualization of work where the flow moves across the columns and so forth and so on. Not exactly. Not exactly. There's rules associated with the Kanban method. So one of them is that nothing may enter the board until it's characterized by work item type. So, the book there is the book from David Anderson on Kanban, or any decent Kanban book that you believe can work, okay? But the main thing is that people understand that there are rules associated with Kanban. In fact, those rules are called policies. Ooh, policies. So, wow, it sounds like this Agile stuff's really rigid, some people will say. And now I'm going to tell you a story. And the story is, the summary, I'm going to tell you the moral of the story first. When you socialize these words, definitions, Agile, Scrum, Kanban, not everyone's going to agree. Does that shock you?
Not at all.
We haven't even gone to we haven't even gotten on base yet, and people are raising their hand and going, I don't like that definition. Here's the 10 reasons why. Okay, so here's what's happening. You're actually vaccinating them against the, incredible thing that's about to happen. Right? So by having these conversations about something as simple as word definitions, here's what's going on. We're inviting people into a conversation. This is a superior idea to what's currently done worldwide. It's not being done worldwide. We're not inviting people into conversations. Instead, tens of millions of dollars are being spent by some companies to consulting firms, and there's no pre-work, there's none of this. There's only assessment, and then boom, they've got 20 coaches on site. You might be one of them. You're not responsible for that, but you are party to it. So if we're going to start doing a good job, let's get good agreements on words. Let's get shared word definitions. All right. So now I want to take one question on this before we go any further.
Dan, we did actually have a couple before, and they're around the same thing. And it's kind of like, what if the ship has already sailed? What if there's an agile transformation underway and you're on that boat? Okay,
let me answer that one for you, if I may. I'm going to open with a question. How's that working for you? How's that working for you? Okay, so if everything's beautiful and nothing hurts, then there's nothing to do. Fair? That's my summary answer. And then my detailed answer is, if you go around and open up space where people, thanks, Vicki. If you open up space for people to speak their mind, they will tell you where the pain points are. They will tell you that Agile's being applied to programs, products, and projects that will not benefit from a full-on Agile approach. They'll tell you that Agile in name only is going on and the same people are making the same decisions in the same ways. They'll tell you everything. So if everything isn't beautiful, if there is pain, then, how about we stop, we put our Sharpie down, and we go back to first principles, like agreements about basic things, like word definitions. Half of the confusion around Scrum is that nobody knows what it is. Nobody has read the Scrum Guide. If you haven't socialized the Scrum Guide to the teams, the stakeholders, and the executives, you have no shot at effective Scrum. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to say that, but it's so true. And it's so easy to remedy. So I want you to go like this. We were well-intended. We meant well. Mistakes were made. We admit those mistakes because we don't know everything. And we want to go forward with everyone now. So we need to take a couple of steps back and get clarity on some things. That's the way I would approach this. Oh, by the way, this works really well for doing that. Really well. Because everyone in this meeting knows they're going to get a hearing in this meeting in 45 to 90 days. This helps them to suspend their disbelief and go forward, pretending and acting as if the stuff could actually work, but only with good leadership, good shared definitions, good agreements, okay? All right, so hopefully I answered most of those questions okay, and then Alec got his hand up and Ryan had a question. Ryan, did I address your question?
Yeah, it sends us down a rabbit hole, I think, too. Because, and I put this in the chat as well, so it's great to have that conversation, but you have to have an invitation to share that feedback with someone who's at a level that they've been lying to themselves for, let's say, 2, 3, 4 years about how well things are going. They're selling, they already sold this 3 years ago as a 10, 20, $50 million engagement. They've spent on the corporate industrial training complex. And now they're 3 years in with a cluster all over the place. Mm-hmm. And now we're asking them to say, okay, let's have a very simple kindergarten conversation about what words mean after $50 million spent. Well, that's not an easy conversation to have with the folks that we may end up interacting with. So that's where I come from.
I don't have a prescription for that or a pill. No. I just recommend exercise and good nutrition. Good exercise at Scrum, good exercise at Kanban, and technically nutritious coaching, right? That's the real deal. So, listen, I want to just say something about this. The people who buy this don't buy organizational learning. They don't buy self-management. They don't buy self-organization. What they buy is a coherent story, even if it's bullshit. Okay? Yeah. Because an incoherent story or one that's hard to follow, like emergence, self-management, self-organization, complex systems, complexity science, none of that is in the language and they can't follow the thread. Okay, so the people who are selling Agile are telling a nice bedtime story. It doesn't actually work, and here's why. Because self-management in employee engagement is what actually scales, not the practices and not your framework. So this is the mantra. This is the gospel that you need to preach. It doesn't matter what our framework is if the people aren't engaged. The people power all the improvement, and the unwilling people power all the impediments. So what are we doing about scaling engagement? What are we doing about releasing, turning that dark energy, that dirty energy into clean energy? Because there's a whole bunch of latent energy in organizations that's always, repressed because it's dark, right? But if we could convert it from dirty energy to clean energy, bam, that's how you do it. And you do it by getting everyone in one room. So a quick show of hands. How many people in this audience have ever attended a whole group meeting, and not just the higher ups, if you're a higher up, not just the higher ups, but everyone in the organization was invited to have conversations, listen to conversations, hear from leadership, and get to some kind of shared understanding about, where we're going with this. How many people have ever been invited into a meeting where we're all going to explore what it means to be agile? And we're going to explore whether this is even possible in our company. How many people have ever been to a meeting like that? All right, so Ned has his hand up. Michael, let me switch to the second. There's 3 different groups. Heidi, Isaac, can you kind of get a quick show of hands? We counted 2 on the first panel.
Yeah, it looks like just 2 because Steve said he was raising his hand.
Okay. All right.
Limited, I would say.
All right. This is why they spent $50 million for nothing. Because they never asked. The people who were affected just basically want some fundamental consideration. This is totally aligned with motivated individuals, self-organizing teams, and people and interactions. Now, I want to point something out. Martin Fowler, I think I did. Did I mention that Martin Fowler spoke out on this 2 days ago in Australia?
Yeah.
And he opened his conversation with, normally everyone who knows me knows that I talk about the current state of software development, and that's my passion, that's what I care about. And I had slides prepared, and I'm just not going to use them. I'm working from some handwritten notes because there's something far more important. And then he went on to say that this non-inclusion imposition stuff is not just incorrect, it's actually harmful. It's harmful to the movement as well. So you're going to have to figure out a way to talk to the execs and say, hey, there's a few things we were supposed to do first that we didn't do. And here's the data that supports that. We did a little survey, and here's what we found out. Most people don't know the definition of Agile. They've never seen the Scrum Guide, and they haven't read anything about Kanban at all. We pumped them through 1 and 2 day classes, but they never really understood the fundamentals. And since the whole thing runs on people, my suggestion is let's align the people, elevate the levels of engagement, get a lot of self-management going, because self-management is what actually scales. And here's how you sell that. Management represents almost a 30% tax on business. Okay. Now, Andrea Chow has a quote that you just put in the chat. I left the Agile Industrial Complex in the PMO imposition of coaches and teams. I want to tell you something. For every person who speaks out and says, like, say they're in an internal organization and they go, I went to my executives, I gave them this information, and I didn't go out in a body bag, and we made real progress. There's 1,000 people who will say nothing because they fear for their jobs, and their names are on social media. They're not going to say a damn thing. They're not even going to like what you say because it could be interpreted as like undermining, not on board and all this kind of stuff. So we collectively are going to improve things by generating evidence. Okay? And it starts with having those conversations with the execs. Okay? So I want to go through this document now. We only have about maybe 10 more minutes before we come in for a smooth landing here. And I want to say that anyone who wants this list, I'm going to share my screen again. Anyone who wants to see this list, have a copy of this PDF, I'll just ship it right to you if you get on my list in the next 24 hours, okay? So danielmezick.com is where you find that. And this will help you a lot. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to define the words, and we're going to get shared agreement with these constituencies. If they have objections, we're going to listen to them, and we're going to keep reducing what we're asking for until they agree. So, we'll start with the rest of your life. If that doesn't work, how about the next 50 years? All right, how about 25 years? How about 12 years? All right, let's just skip right down to it. How about 12 months? How about 6 months? Now, see how it's starting to get ridiculous? And yeah, we'll evolve our definition of Agile and everything, but for now, let's use the manifesto. Okay, next thing, the whole purpose of doing this is to identify problems, get a sense of the readiness of the three constituencies, the three groups, start with a shared language. When God scattered the people of Babel, none of them spoke the same language. Is that what we want for our Agile transformation? Okay, we can get a running start. And most importantly, we can hold people accountable to their agreements. Okay, so those are the big reasons. Okay, and I say here, if you're doing a reboot or a remake of your Agile transformation, this is the place to start. Yes, it's painful. If you break a bone and it doesn't set right, what does a doctor have to do to it? They have to break it again, don't they? Yeah, they do. So you better darn well make sure that you get started up, with everything in alignment. Otherwise, you're going to have to break it again. So here's the 4 basic things. And, I'm kind of summing up now, but I want to just sum up how it goes. Step 1, socialize and get agreement on the words. Step 2, socialize and get agreement on the rules. Now, this is really sticky. This is going to be really tough because you're going to be telling them that the rules are going to change about how people make decisions. So whoever's making decisions now may still be making them or may not. And there's a little exercise at the bottom that I'll show you that will kind of make people a little more comfortable. But if you haven't transformed the decision making with Kanban, with Agile, with Scrum, you haven't transformed anything at all. Okay? So this second step is where it gets really, really tricky, okay? Step 3, and this is a long process because not everyone's happy when they realize that decision making is going to pivot. Okay, step 3, prepare executive leaders for what is about to happen, and what is now fully expected of them if they wish to be successful. Now, you can do this while you're getting started, but I really will want to see you take this first step and this third step and put it at the top. Because once the leadership team is aligned and we've heard from everybody, their objections and their thinking, then we're in a spot where we can go forward and we can bring it to the rest of the organization, and we're going to have a lot more resolve and be much better at leadership with this stuff if we work with the leadership team first. So I like to teach the leadership team the kinds of things we're going to do. So I introduce them to different meeting formats. I introduce them to lean coffee. I introduce them to sometimes a small open space event. I introduce them to the concept of facilitation. I encourage them to start making meetings optional as an experiment to see how that goes. So for maybe one of your meetings a week, one staff meeting or something, make it optional to attend. A lot of really interesting data falls out of that experiment. And then we have great conversations with the leaders. Get them using a Kanban board. Get them to understand that nothing hits the board until it's characterized by work item type, which also implies that they have to know the cycle time of how long these things is probably going to be. They have to make a guess, right? So all of a sudden, like, oh, I don't have time. They start looking at their watch, and you know what I mean. But listen, here's the good news. You're going to have to face all of this anyway. So do you want to pay me now or pay me later? When the whole thing's in flight, can you imagine getting shared agreements when the ship's in flight and it's losing altitude? What? That's not going to work. That never works. And then, you know, it's like a plane that's, you know, out of fuel and is starting to head down this way, and we're trying to get shared agreements. And I can tell you a joke now. It's a kind of a church joke. It goes like this, you know, the plane's going to crash. People yell like, is there a pastor or a rabbi? The guy goes, I'm a pastor. Well, pray for us. Our Agile transformation is like, it's going to crash and burn. It's like, I've got a beautiful prayer for that. But first, let's have an offering. So that's my joke. All right. Step 4, work in enterprise iterations. Repeat, work in enterprise iterations that have a beginning, a middle, and an end that create natural boundaries for inspection and adaptation. And you know what? I don't care if you never look at open space agility again. What I want you to do, though, is I want you to get everyone in one room and answer the question, how can we improve? How can we improve on improving? Are we improving? How can we speed it up? If you do that, you are going to convert the resistors to tolerators and the tolerators to supporters. That's what's going to happen. Okay? So like I said, people power all the improvement and all the impediments. We must therefore set the stage for success by getting clear agreements. Agreements matter a lot. Without those agreements, we're going to have trouble right out of the chute. Okay? Here's another point. Your Agile pilots worked because willing teams were selected. Show of hands, how many people did a pilot with unwilling teams? Don't all respond at once. Okay, a couple did. How did that work, actually, right? Not too good. Most of the time, common sense, work with willing teams. But then we get organizational amnesia, and we totally forget that the willing teams powered the success with the pilot. Okay? So you can't scale the success of a pilot unless you're working with people who've demonstrated the same level of enthusiasm. So in an ideal world, here's what I want you to do. I want you to focus. I want you to get the executives to agree that if we focus on the willing teams, we can reduce the cost of the transformation by 80%. I want you to sell it on cost savings. You can reduce the consulting spend. Ask them, how much did we spend on consultants last year? Oh, $8 million. Agile consultants, $8 million. How'd you like to get that down to $3 million in the next 12 months? I can show you how. We're going to engage our people. And oh, by the way, they're the ones that are really invested here. Once the budget runs out go the consultants, and we're left picking up the pieces. So we need to work with willing teams. Okay, last thing. Second to last thing. People are flexible and change their minds. Do not give up on them. People change their minds. If you ask them for less and they play along, they have an aha through direct experience. They go, you know, I was totally wrong about this. You know, we had a guy at Intuit who called a session in the first open space. Why Agile can never work here, especially Scrum. Never. And he got like 20 people to come to the session. By the second open space, 90 days later, that dude was a total convert. And he's like, this is like the best process I've ever experienced. And I don't know why I was so afraid. He was a UX guy afraid of losing his job. Okay. The willing people power the improvement, but the unwilling people power the impediments. You need to keep that in mind. So the more we can convert them to willing people, the easier this whole thing becomes. All right, so we only have like maybe 3 or 4 more minutes for me to talk, and then we're going to be done and come in for a smooth landing here, I think, right?
Yeah, but Dan, we lost your screen share again.
Oh, sorry about that. Let me go back. Thank you for reminding me. So, step 1, get agreements on the key definitions. There's 3 things to socialize to 3 different groups. There's 9 things to do. Okay, the checklist, just in case you miss one, the checklist goes through every single one of those things. You just check it off. Socialize 3 words to 3 constituencies. That's 9 specific tasks. Okay, and now, definition of Scrum, definition of Kanban. Here's some notes. Not everyone's happy. Fear kills learning. By having these conversations in a group setting, you take the fear, you reduce the fear so people can learn. We all know that Agile requires learning to actually work. That's what it is. It's a learning framework at the level of group. If people are afraid and triggered, you have no shot at this at all. So we're gonna take the air out of everyone's anxiety by having those conversations. And I really like the idea of getting everyone in one room for 3 hours to hammer all this out. You need to get authorization from the execs, but ideally that's what you do. It's not practical all the time, so use common sense, but get it done one way or the other. At one organization that I recently coached at, they did not authorize me to go to the stakeholders and socialize the Scrum Guide. They told me no. I asked for permission, and they told me no. And I don't want to get into why, because it's beyond the scope of the conversation, but I'm telling you right off the bat, you're going to run into trouble when you start to use this method. Don't you want to know up front what you're up against? This is actually another way to convince executives to do this. Don't you want to know? Don't you want to know what you're up against? Let's get everyone in one room and find out. Maybe everything's beautiful. Maybe it isn't. Let's go find out. Okay?
Don't you have to have an... Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, please. No, Brian, go ahead, man. Go ahead.
Don't you have to have an environment of safety where you can inspect that in real time with people? And I think I wrote something out there about they spend so much, they know how to buy tools. They buy Jira, they buy Rally, they buy, version 1, whatever.
Yep.
And that's what inspection is to them. But I think you said it early on, but you have to be safe to be able to share that feedback and have it inspected by people who can make the new decisions. So
let me answer that. So here's what you do. I work with the leaders first, and we close the door and we have a conversation and we elicit and solicit their objections. Okay, and actually when they don't say anything and we go, what, there's no objections at all? There's a pregnant moment of silence, and then somebody bursts out laughing or cracks a joke and everybody laughs, because you can cut it with the knife. So what you do is you get the leader to get up there and say, look, we're going to be asking the organization to do this. We have to be of one mind about this. I want to hear what you guys have to say. Everyone in this room. Not all of you are, formally authorized leaders. Some of you are influentials. We all need to be able to express ourselves and get through this first step if we're going to go to the next step. So let's go and do that. And then they learn together how to actually set the stage for that. Okay. And then what I commonly do is, this is going to shock you. I'll actually say, well, Mr. Jones, you run the PMO. Some of your decision making is going to be reduced. How does that make you feel? And then we have that conversation, you kind of pull it out of them, so the leader combined with the facilitator can pull it out of them. So I would say do it at the executive level first, and then teach them the same thing we did in those meetings we need to do in these meetings with the rank and file. Okay. And like it says here, objections exist at every level of the company. I only have like maybe 2 more minutes to talk, but I want to say something here. Here's what it is. One of the biggest impediments to Agile is highly authorized people who are not going to come along. They say yes with their mouths. They report to the top leader, and they're still not doing it. And everyone who reports to them gets the unspoken, nonverbal signal, you know, if you really go all the way on this, I'm not going to be happy. It's not said explicitly, but everyone knows. So you've got to handle the objections. If you don't handle the objections from the top leadership on down, it's important to allow them to be freely and openly expressed. If you can't get there, you need to keep engaging in remedial training until you get there. That's my feeling about the whole thing. Okay? And I actually have people sign a one-page agreement. If you want to see one of my blog posts, it's called Get It in Writing. And the last statement in that blog post goes like this, because truth be told, you're going to be needing that later on, that shared agreement, right? So we go through, we do the 3 definitions, then we do the 3 changes to the rules. And I would just want to sum up with one thing and say, a very simple thing is to use Kanban. It's just like people think it's rows and columns and anyone can do whatever they want. No. Work item types, cycle time, policies. It's all part of Kanban. So I'm at the end. I didn't really get through the whole doc. We took some questions and they were very pointy. I like those. And I'm really grateful for you all being here. But we have an agreement to end on time, right? Right. So I'm going to hand the floor back to the organizers, and thank you all very much for your presence today. I really appreciate you. Thank you.
This is great. Thank you so much for
this was fantastic.
sharing your time. Really, really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Whoever hasn't signed up for his list, it's in the chat, danielmezick.com, right? And you can sign up for your list. I'm looking forward to taking this checklist myself and using it. So yes, thanks so much. So for everybody, remember to go to Coaching Agile Journeys. The recording will be posted on past events, so you'll be able to replay it and remember this awesome discussion and pass on the word for Coaching Agile Journeys. Thanks so much, Daniel and Joe and everyone else who joined today.
Thanks, Heidi.
Yeah.
Thanks, Isaac.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Daniel. This was awesome.
You're very welcome. Thank you for saying. I'm glad I can add some value.
Yeah, good questions, everybody. Thank you for joining and adding value. Yeah. We appreciate you guys.
If you have any questions at all, feel free to email me. It's in the document, and or you can ask Heidi and get to me that way, any way you want. And look for me up on Twitter and so forth.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you again. Bye.
Yeah.